Hi everybody, welcome back to the Slide Rule Pass YouTube channel, your home for football stats and chats. We thought we'd come back and do a special. We spoke about him, we've moaned about him, we've hated him. Bruce is finally out of Newcastle United, and there's no better man to join me than Dan. How you doing, buddy? You okay?
I'm doing fine, Chris. How are you?
I'm very good. Just in case the viewers were mistaken there, Mark has not been through the Fountain of Youth. This is Dan. Dan is standing in for Mark today, which is he's an Apple substitute.
Secretly, I am, Mark. But no one
you are,
really
Mark. You've been drinking that elixir of life, mate. But listen, obviously, it's been a massive week for Newcastle United yet again, mate. You know, we finally got rid of the Baron of Bacon, as I like to refer to him as, and you know, we're gonna get stuck into this in a minute or so. And I'm very interested because there's been a lot of blowback from the media, Dan, hasn't there? It's been quite pathetic in many ways, mate.
Yeah, the friends of Steve Bruce have really come out in force, haven't they, over the last 24 hours?
God. 100%. But listen, we'll take shot and aim at them in a matter of minutes, mate. But for now, we'll roll the credits. Let's get stuck in and fry some bacon, mate.
I'll get the pan out. Give us a minute.
All right, so let's get stuck in. Me and Dan are ready to chop the bacon up and fry him alive because Steve Bruce has been binned by Newcastle United. We are happy. We're ecstatic. You know, a lot of the media aren't. There's a lot of tears going on. If you turn on Sky Sports News right now, I'm waiting for Elton John to pull out his freaking piano and play Candle in the Wind for Steve Bruce because it's absolutely pathetic at the moment, Dan. But before we get stuck into all those idiots in a couple of minutes, Steve Bruce is gone, mate. What does it mean to you as a Newcastle fan?
Chris, just before I get into it, I want to just... You're like Shakespeare with the words you come out with. Honestly, you're a modern-day Shakespeare. Honestly,
one day bard. I'm a bard.
Yes,
exactly, mate.
You really are. What does it mean? Well, as I said yesterday on my special live television appearance,
well done, yeah. BBC's own Dan Wales.
I have nothing against Steve Bruce as a man, not at all.
Yeah,
because you know, I think in private he probably is quite a nice bloke, as far as I'm concerned. You know, like there's nothing I have against him as a person. However, from a professional point of view and looking solely on his work at Newcastle United, thank God, because it has been awful in every sense of the word. I think we can all agree on this. Obviously, those looking in from an external point of view for some reason disagree, and that's based utterly on complete laziness, in my opinion, and just a lack of will to actually examine the situation properly. And they just think that because he's, you know, a friend of theirs, or there's this narrative as well that he was a great player, which matters in my opinion. As we've seen proven with, say, for example, Gary Neville, being a good player does not at all translate into being a good manager. Sometimes it does, but there is no exact link there. And so I don't know why people bring that argument up, but yeah. His football's been awful. His comments to journalists have been disrespectful. Some of the things he said in press conferences have been absolutely, well, wild. Like, why would you take a dog to a fireworks display? I still wonder. Yeah. And of course, the Baron of Bacon, as we all know, like, how's the bacon, did you say, and all that. Yeah, it is a relief, just from the fact that we are sleepwalking towards, or we were sleepwalking towards relegation.
Absolutely,
and
mate.
You know, like with if he was to remain in the job, I genuinely did fear for us. And to be honest, it's not like we're out of the situation yet because we're still in it. But hopefully now it represents a change in that fact that we might start actually winning some games, because we haven't done that yet this season.
Well, it's very interesting that you say that. I mean, you know, the main thing with Steve Bruce here is you're totally right. I don't understand that comparison where these guys pull up, oh yeah, he was a great centre-half, you know, he won trophies for Manchester United. You know, Steve Bruce isn't our centre-half, he's our manager. They're two completely different machines altogether. Yes, he was a very good player, you know, and he did win trophies for Manchester United, and of course that gives him experience as a winner, as a player. But if you look at him as a manager, it was quite funny when Sky Sports pulled up the statistics slide. I think I said this in the group chat. It was almost like a producer's in their ear going, "Oh shit, there's only like one team over 30%. Take it down." But they took it down really, really quickly. You know, all of us kind of crazy statisticians on Twitter screenshotting this and going, "He's crap. Look at his stats. Look at his stats." And just speaking of stats, Mark isn't here, but he's here in spirit. So just to pull this up,
we love you, Mark. We love you.
We love you, Mark. We're still thinking of you, mate. But This is brass taxes here.
Look at that. Look at that.
Exactly. Steve Bruce has been sacked because of this exact screenshot here. For anybody listening on any audios, we've got Steve Bruce's Premier League story here with Newcastle United. 84 games, 23 wins, 23 draws, 38 defeats, 94 goals scored, and 139 goals conceded, giving him a 27.4% win ratio. Now, we worked this out, Dan, before we come on. That is a total of 1.6 goals conceded per game. And we're going to look at the previous manager, to Steve Bruce. I said his name there, the R-bomb. I'll drop it, Rafa Benitez. We're going to look at Rafa Benitez and Steve Bruce in comparison in a minute.
All these pundits are making the comparison, so why shouldn't we?
Yeah, we're going to do that in a couple of seconds. But just going back to the whole point of why Steve Bruce has lost his job, whether there was a takeover or not, those kind of stats there are not good stats. They're not good managerial stats. If any other manager had those stats in this division, they'd be gone. They'd be gone by now. And he should have been gone by now. He should have been gone last season. I think Charlotte said it on the last True Faith podcast. They keep talking about these, league finishes that he managed to do in his 2 seasons with us, 12th and 13th. That wasn't progression. They were relegation fights right up to the final wire. And the only reason we managed to stay up was because other teams had their flip-flops on because they were comfortably safe.
It's not progression because it's the same finishes we had under Rafa. Surely if you're wanting to say Steve Bruce is a good manager, we should be getting better, but we didn't get better. We
absolutely
the league position. Like if you want to make that argument, they didn't get any better under. They just stayed the same.
No, they were terrible. I mean, it's interesting. We will get into the Bruce versus Rafa slide in a minute, but as a season ticket holder, Dan, watching Bruce Ball as it's named, Mark loves to call it Bruce Ball. Bruce Ball is so terrible. I mean, as a fan, you're talking 23% possession, backs to the wall. Hoofing the ball up to a guy that's 4'2" and Ryan Fraser. Sometimes I did that the weekend. I mean, as a paying supporter for that product, you must have felt shortchanged during his 2 years, surely, no?
Understatement.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna I think if I look at Sunday against Tottenham, that game just sums. And I'm sort of quoting what Norman said on the True Faith podcast on Sunday. It just sort of sums up what his reign was like. Tottenham aren't a particularly brilliant team compared to some teams in the Premier League. They're not brilliant. But we can make any team good by giving them 10 yards of space on the ball. Any team can do that. Like, if you give a team and players the space to play, you can make any team look like world beaters. And that's exactly what we did. Sean Longstaff, John Joe Shelby, they turn like cruise liners. This is the thing, and perhaps it's, and I'm not saying that they're terrible players because clearly under previous management they've been all right players and they've done a job, but suddenly they're just crap and they can't do anything. And yeah, it's just awful. Backs to the wall. We drop 10 as soon as the first goal goes in and things are looking good, and then we drop 10 yards, and then Spurs get an equaliser, and we drop further again. We're pretty much in the bloody Gallagher end by this point. And then, the atmosphere goes and it's just dire once again. And obviously all the excitement and the joy of the new regime coming in just feels sucked out of the players. Of course, the horrible incident occurred and that did its bit to suck the atmosphere anyway. But
yeah.
Regardless of that, the football after that, even that moment, was still awful. And, Tottenham, as I say, not a brilliant team, but came and passed us off the park, played us off the park in general. Within 2 or 3 passes, they'd pretty much be in every time. They could literally, they could go from the back, play one pass through the midfield, one pass through the defence, and they'd be in.
This is every team they've done. I watched non-league, lower league teams in the cups when we were playing with Bruce, and even they passes off the pitch, next to Newport County and guys like that. Blackburn Rovers,
Newport, Rochdale, and
they were running right through the middle of us, weren't there? There was no fight. I mean, it's interesting because everybody talks about, the Rafa side and all that and how it's comparable, and we'll look at that in a minute. But, that famous clip with the tackles, remember, was against Leicester. When it was one after the other. You were there. You didn't see any of that in a Bruce performance. There was none of that. There was no fight. There was no determination. There was no grit. From a guy who had that as a player, if you want to compare that, then fine. Steve Bruce did that as a player. He ran through brick walls. He played with broken noses. His team don't do that. So what has he done differently as a manager to knock it out of the players?
It's as well. I mean, obviously, getting back to Rafa again. I remember there was that game. It was Almiron's first game against Huddersfield back into the 2018-19 season.
And he hit the post with that.
Yes, and
shot.
he hit the post, and it was a brilliant chip, brilliant effort. But the build up to that chance was like the passing them. It was brilliant, and I've never seen an example of that under Steve Bruce once, as far as I can remember.
No.
Like I look back at the end of Rafa's last season in 2018-19, and apart from say the top six, we were the best team in the league at that point. In sort of those last few months, Newcastle were probably the best, like outside the top six. I'm sure in terms of the form book backs me up on that as well. I think they were about 7th in the form book, I can say from about February or March 2019 to May. They were playing brilliant football, and then we go and spend 100 million on that under Bruce's regime, and we get worse.
Well, I mean that's something we'll come on in a bit more detail in a second. But what really infuriates me about Bruce, obviously he's gone. The statement from the club came, which was clearly written for him by somebody else, because it was quite respectful, it was quite classy. He was saying, "Thank you for everybody for giving me the time and all this stuff," and and you thought, right, he's gone. We were all just too busy partying.
It should have been finished with a shouldn't it?
Well, obviously he didn't write it. It would have been. It would have been cheesy chips, have a kebab sauce and everything else. But shortly after that, he obviously did an interview with his long-term buddy Luke Edwards, and this was Bruce at his worst. Kind of tone deaf, ineloquent, straight from the off, blaming everybody else. And he said, I think I'm not going to quote verbatim because, in my opinion, it's today's headlines, tomorrow's chip paper. I think it's an absolute waste of space. But he turned around and he said, "It's not nice to be not welcome from day one. It's not nice to hear people call you, it was a fat, inept cabbage head," I think he said. Now, of course, we don't condone personal abuse. We've said that. You said that. You said that live on the BBC, as you didn't say before. Live on the BBC, you said that. So, that's right. We don't condone abuse to people, right? But giving a manager criticism for not winning football games is every football fan's God-given right, whether you support Newcastle United, Manchester United, Real Madrid, or bloody North Shields. You can criticize a manager of your football club for not doing what he's paid to do. Am I right, Dan?
You're spot on. Like in any other industry, if someone's not doing their job well, they're going to get criticised from a professional point of view, and they're going to get sacked. Why is it any different?
Yeah, that is what you're paid to do. You are paid to win football games, and if you don't win football games, you are going to be under pressure. And he's even said that in interviews. I think he said that recently in a couple of interviews not too long ago. I'm paid to win football games, and I'm struggling to do that at the minute. And you thought, well, okay then, so you are in line to get sacked, then, aren't you? So
he always said like judge me after 10 games of a season, and well, we have. There's a fly buzzing around me as well.
It's a reincarnated version of Steve Bruce.
He's come to attack me.
He's going for your custard and your bacon, mate. Watch it in the background there. But no, I mean, the problem I have here, I think the problem with everything in the media, I've listened to TalkSport, Simon Jordan, and all these other guys talking shit today. I've listened to Sky Sports. They've even wheeled Mikel Arteta out to talk about the abuse.
And Dean Smith of Aston Villa as well.
Sean Dyche, all these other guys. I mean, I don't want to sound horrible here, right? We haven't battered Steve Bruce down to the point where he's trying to take his own life. Now, I'm not making light of that situation, right? But that's the way Sky Sports are trying to talk about this. We voiced our criticism of a manager.
I've got a point on this as well, but I'll let you finish.
Yeah, he hasn't won games. And do you know what? The bit that really pisses me off, Dan, and TalkSport in particular were like this morning. I think I put this on Twitter, actually, that I listened to Alan Brazil, who said, I mean, he's just an absolute moron. He is like the king of the tits on TalkSport, on that conveyor belt of absolute wazzicks that just talk absolute nonsense. He's probably
there was him and Gabriel Bonglahor on today.
Oh my God! And they were talking about what we're going to talk about in a minute. But just to finish up on it, he said, Brucey's gone. He's had the payoff. He's had £8 million. There's some Portuguese fella linked to the job. Now he was referencing Paulo Fonseca, right? Which we're going to talk about later on. We're football fans. We're not professionals, right? And we can research who Paulo Fonseca is. Why can't you do that, Alan Brazil?
It's just a bit xenophobic, isn't it?
Totally, mate. It's totally xenophobic. It's ignorant. It's that we are England mentality. One of the British boys has been binned by Big Sam, Brucey, Allardyce.
Mark Hughes, Tony Pulis.
Yeah, it's all that absolute load of bollocks, mate. But they need to be better in the media. That's why fan-led media like True Faith and what we're doing at Slide Rule Pass. If you like it, guys, click like and subscribe. That's why there's a good plug. But that's why things like this are on the rise, because people want to listen to people who talk sense and have a balanced view about things, don't they, mate?
Yeah, and I'm just reading here. I'm going to quote now from Jack Wilshere on Twitter this morning.
Oh, okay.
He says, absolutely disgusting the way this guy, Steve Bruce, has been treated. Yes, he may have had some bad results, but he's a human being with family and kids. In an era where we are encouraging people to talk about mental health, this is unacceptable. This man still has a lot to give in the game, but doesn't want to because of abuse. How can that be right? Top manager who deserves respect. Now, what I'd say to Jack Wilshere is, before having a go at us, why doesn't he not criticise Arsenal supporters for the way they vilified Arsene Wenger?
Well said, mate. Pot kettle black. They ran Arsene Wenger out of town, didn't they?
And just to add to that, of course, Steve Bruce has had an awful record at Newcastle, and we're criticising him. Yet Arsene Wenger took Arsenal to the very top and won so many trophies with them, and they still crucified him. So as far as I'm concerned, Jack Wilshere can get lost.
Well, Jack Wilshere is a funny guy. So Jack Wilshere obviously is without a club at 27 years old. Was a fantastic player for England at one point, and he can't get back into the game for whatever reason it may be. Jack Wilshere's had his own mental health troubles, and do you know what? I wish him well, and I hope he gets over them.
No,
but
I'm in no way am I supporting sort of mental health abuse, but
of course not, mate.
You cannot criticize us and before realizing that your own kind did that to another manager who had actually won things for you.
But they don't want to hear that, Dan. What they want to do, Newcastle United fans, I think we've always been there to be shot at by the top six. They love nothing more than seeing a fat crying Geordie on a telly. They put it all over the trailers and all sorts of stuff. And now we've been bought by this mega rich consortium. We're there for everybody to shoot. I wrote a piece for True Faith, didn't I? That the top six are just basically out to do us.
I'm loving it personally. I'm absolutely loving it because they're all absolutely fuming. They're all petrified of what we're going to become.
Absolutely,
but they are absolutely shitting themselves to use some French there.
Absolutely, yeah. But 100%, what will happen is that if, say, one of the new guys come in, whether it be Fonseca, Favre, or Howe, which we'll come on to in a bit, if they go through a run of winning games and we play breathtaking football, right, Steve Bruce will be nowhere near their lips. They'll be raving about how wonderful this Newcastle United team is. We start signing some big-name marquee players. They'll be all over us, just like they were with Manchester City. When Manchester City started to come, they were still referring to City as the little club in Manchester, Gillingham away, Sean Goder, all this other crap. And it wasn't until they got to the next level where Sky were thinking, hang on a minute, these guys could make us a few quid on the telly every other week. Then they had their tongue so far up Man City's arse that you would have thought they were the best team that's ever played the game. And I do think we'll go the same route, Dan. But going back to Steve Bruce, as we're digressing a bit, going back to Steve Bruce, we're not saying as Newcastle fans, I'm not, Dan's not, nobody is, right? We're not attacking Steve Bruce as a bloke, okay? As a manager, he's not good enough. He's never been good enough.
No, we're not attacking him like personally, we're attacking him professionally.
Exactly.
That's the difference. There's a massive difference, and there's a massive, massive difference.
That's the same as everything else. If you hired a joiner and none of his shelves were straight, none of his doors hung properly, you'd sack him. If you hired a plumber and he couldn't put the pipes together, you'd sack him. If you hired a gardener and he couldn't cut the grass, you'd sack him, and so forth and so forth. Steve Bruce is a football manager who's paid to win games. He didn't do it, so he's been sacked. And that's really it. There's no other narrative or sinister motive from Newcastle fans than that.
If anything, the sinister motive is coming from because one of them today is blatantly making up lies against us now. I read it. I can't remember. I'm going to try and find it on Twitter, but there was one of them, and it's literally, I forget where it was, but I read it this morning, and it was literally complete and utter bollocks. Right. Yeah, it was, and people are calling out saying literally you're actually you're making it up. Like how can I? And from a journalistic point of view, that's unforgivable in my opinion.
Oh, of course it is, and borderline slanderous as well, But it's the whole Steve Bruce thing, Like I say, we need to move on from it. Hopefully, we will be able to move on from it. Hopefully, a new manager coming soon. But just moving on to the media again and their portrayal of it, you hit the nail on the head before, Dan, about this whole Rafa versus Bruce scenario. Now,
the comparison they love to make.
Yeah, we didn't create this narrative. The media spun this narrative. You're talking about a Champions League winning manager versus a Championship manager. That's basically the nutshell between these two.
They're making a comparison, but there is no comparison there.
There's no comparison in terms of CVs, but just to pull up this slide, this is what the friends of Steve Bruce look at, and they gloss over this as a kind of blueprint as to how they do it. So Gabriel Bonglehor, Brazil, they looked at something like this. To be fair, I give them too much credit. They probably haven't gone into the detail Mark's gone, but we've already analysed Bruce's Premier League record to the left. This is Rafa's to the right. Now, just going through that, it's very similar. 86 games, 27 wins.
Rafa's is already better anyway. It's already better. Of course it is.
It's already better. 21 wins, 38 defeats, 97 goals, and 107 conceded. Now, this is very, very important. So what Rafa Benitez built at Newcastle United, giving him a 31.4% win ratio. He built his team, as you know, Dan, on a solid defensive unit. And as you've said numerous times, I'll pass this over to you in a second, the players that he had are still there. Steve Bruce, despite being this brilliant centre-half that they all want to keep telling us, has managed to ruin that defence in his time here, mate. Over to you. I know you got a big say on this, mate. What do you think about that?
Well, I'm going to firstly half quote Craig Hope's article from today or yesterday, I can't remember exactly, and say, Rafa Benitez left a defensive wall at Newcastle, and Steve Bruce has left a pile of bricks.
Yeah, 100%. I could not agree with Craig any more than that. It's perfectly summed up. And like we say, this is a guy who was a top centre half as they keep ramming down our throat.
Yeah, exactly. But defensively, we're shite. And there's no other way of looking at it. We're utterly shite. And with the same personnel pretty much to a T, which that's the biggest comparison. Obviously the stats are the stats as we've just seen there, but that fails in and even though Rafa is already better on those stats anyway, I know it's only marginally on a few of them, but still is better. The context that is missing from the stats is unbelievable. And that's the bits the pundits and the friends of Steve Bruce are completely missing out. If you compare the attacking lineups, for example, Steve Bruce has got Callum Wilson, Alan St. Maximin, Miguel Almiron, Ryan Fraser, Joe Willock, even Joe Linton. We'll even include him. Rafa Benitez had Joselu, Christian Atsu, Islam Slimani for a little bit, to name a few. Obviously, Perez was good in spells. Rondon was good in that season as well. But you cannot compare. And obviously that translates into the net spends as well. Obviously, the defense is very similar, but the squad, from an attacking sense, there is no comparison because you're comparing Joselu to Callum Wilson.
There's no comparison at all.
You're comparing Alan St. Maximin to Christian Atsu.
I'd be like, if you bought St. Maximin on Wish, you might get Christian Atsu.
And yet,
how you would do that.
And even then, Rafa's stats are still better.
Yeah, exactly, mate. But this is the thing; they don't look in that much detail. When you look at it, the friends of Steve Bruce in the media, they literally take a screenshot of that. It's the same likes of Paul Mercer and all these other idiots. They look at when Newcastle are on the table, look at the comparable points, and they say, he's doing a great job. He's doing just as good of a job as Rafa. But as we said before, the way we played in the games, the hope that we had going into games, the tactical nous that Rafa implemented.
You just felt like Rafa wanted to be part of a project, didn't you? And you just felt exactly that.
But going to games, Dan, when Rafa Benitez was in charge of this Newcastle United team, a very limited team, greater than the sum of its parts, as we've said several times, that for us as fans, that filled us full of more hope that we were able to get something out of that game, whether that be a draw, whether that be a win, whatever it may be. That was what we had with Rafa Benitez because he was a Champions League winning manager. He was a great manager. He was a football man. The work he put in the training pitch, you could see players progressing. Sean Longstaff, Isaac Hayden, Jamal Lascelles. All you see with Steve Bruce's players regressing. Lascelles looks like
was touted for England under Rafa.
Exactly. He was a leader. He was vocal. He was strong when he was on the pitch. Yes, he had limited ability, but his heart and everything else, you believe this guy could get, that defense going. He was shouting at players. You don't see that now anymore. Sean Longstaff came in, looked like a brilliant defensive midfielder, comfortable on the ball.
Was about to be sold to Man United for 50 million.
Exactly. You look at him now, we've been looking to get 5 million for Longstaff the way that Bruce has regressed him. So, with all of that said and done, that's what a manager, that's the legacy a manager leaves at a club. If a manager comes into your club and he makes your players better and he progresses your players and then he leaves, then he's a good manager. If he makes them worse and he regresses them and he's got a 27% win ratio, how can anybody who classes himself as a professional, Dan, tell us as Newcastle fans, a passionate, loyal, knowledgeable fan base, that he's done a good job?
Because they're lazy and they don't look at that's the thing. It's exactly that simple. They just, as I say, they look at the outset and just say, oh right, the stats are quite similar. He's matched them points wise, maybe,
Yeah, definitely.
And they just go off that, and the word is completely, it's laziness. It's just laziness.
It's embarrassing, and you were right before when you hit the nail on the head, mate. And this is quite an inflammatory thing to say about these guys. But look at Brazil, Merson, all these other guys. There is definitely a bit of xenophobia in there, no question about that. They want these British managers to succeed because of the mates. They have a glass of wine with them at the games. They played with them or they played against them or whatever. They've come through the footballing ranks with them. They're sitting in the studio because they don't want to be a manager. Bruce knows,
because they'd be crap managers if they even tried it.
100%. Well, Paul Merson tried and failed miserably. Even Gary Neville, who I think is a very, very articulate, very good pundit, probably
he's one of the ones who's actually starting to half get it a little bit now.
Well, he's turned a little bit now.
To an extent, but then I look at his mate Paul Scholes, and then Gallagher shots vilified him the other day, and that was brilliant to see.
Well, that was pathetic when he said he might win the championship, but then he said, "What did he say? I hate these managers who get big payouts for being failures, but Steve Bruce deserves every penny of it." He thought, well, that's because he's your mate.
It was more. I think Paul Scholes said, improvement's not going to happen overnight, and then what was it? One of the Gallagher shots lads was saying, he's been in the job 3 years, 2-3 years.
Exactly. But it's just pure laziness, Dan, as you rightly say. But, what I'm looking forward to really, seeing the back of Steve Bruce, I'm looking forward to not seeing that cronyism, that mateyism, people referring to him as Brucey. I don't want to hear that anymore. I don't like that, because they can't be impartial. And obviously you're going to be a journalist, Dan. You're already a journalist now. That's what you strive to be. You have to have impartiality. I mean, you look at someone like Jake Humphrey, who's very good on BT. He's very impartial. Even Shearer Match of the Day is very impartial. When we're crap, Shearer goes after us. Like Rio Ferdinand, Scholes, they don't really criticise Manchester United if they're good or bad or whatever it may be. They don't criticise their mates. You have to be impartial, mate, don't you, as a professional, surely?
You do. It's the whole point of journalism. Even, Craig Hope supports Newcastle. We know this. And yet, we'll criticize and criticize and criticize. That's the whole point. You've got to sort of know when your own house is on fire. I think that's the most important thing. That's the most important thing. I think probably being a journalist, you've got to obviously be able to criticize sort of your own beat, essentially.
Well, exactly. But it does make me laugh, Dan, because, I said this to my mate earlier in the day. We were talking about it. Like Gary Neville's a great example. I'd quite like a manager who's quite fiery. We're going to come on to our potential new manager soon, but I'd quite like a manager to say to Gary Neville, so you're telling me how to do my job, Gary. Did you do that when you were at Valencia and you got sacked? I'd quite like to see that. I'd quite like to see that. Wouldn't you? Because he wouldn't have an answer, would he? Because, yes, he's very knowledgeable. He's got his big pad and his pen and all that stuff, right? But if a manager threw that back at him, I don't think he'd have a leg to stand on. But putting that in context of Steve Bruce keeps telling us all he's been a manager for, 100 years, 1,000 games, whatever it is, right? So Steve Bruce knows what a manager's job is all about. He knows he's measured on results no matter what happens. And what really pisses me off about this whole thing, going back to what he said to Luke Edwards, from day one, they wanted me to fail. No, we didn't. From day one, we might not have wanted you over the guy who'd been here before you, but we wanted you to succeed because we're Newcastle United fans. We want a good Newcastle United.
We want the team to do. It's not like we purposely want the team to lose just because you're in charge, Steve.
Exactly. But this just shows you the narcissistic, self-indulgent of the man, that he thinks that we are hating him over the results. We weren't liking you from the start because you weren't Rafa, and the way Rafa left was quite distasteful. But you could have turned that round. You could have gone on the charm defensive. You could have won games. And do you know what, Dan? you even asked the man yourself on BBC Newcastle.
I did.
Why do you keep talking us down? And he said, "Oh well, Dan, I didn't really think I did that. I'll definitely work on that." And he didn't do it.
That was quite
wasn't
good.
too bad. But he didn't do it, did he? The next game he was doing exactly the same
that's
shit.
The thing, and he didn't like as. He was very like his response to me was I was actually quite impressed with sort of what he said, and he sort of seemed to take it on board at the time, but then didn't act upon it in the actual press conferences. So which was
talk is cheap. Yeah, is cheap, isn't it, mate, with things like that? But it's interesting because there's only been a couple of players who have really voiced that kind of sadness that he's gone.
Callum Wilson has. Joe Willock.
Maximin, big Joe time Willock. Maximin, yeah. But it's funny with Bruce, because if you look at the pundits in the media that love him, okay, your Robbie Savages, your Chris Suttons, your all these other guys. Now, they love him because when he was a manager, he gave them days off to go play golf. He let them bugger off early to go pick the kids up from school. And don't get me wrong, that's lovely as an employer, right? But when you're losing games and you're shit as a team, every minute on that training pitch matters. You need to work on you need to work on and get it right. So these guys go, oh, well, Brucey's a great guy. He used to give me Friday afternoon off. He used to go to the pub with the lads. That means he's a great manager in Newcastle.
But you're bottom of the league and you weren't winning.
Exactly. But that's the thing. If you said to Chris Sutton, for example, or Robbie Savage, Robbie Savage is a bit of a shithouse, but if you said to Chris Sutton, your most successful spell of your career was at Blackburn Rovers where you won the league, right? Did Kenny give you days off? Was Kenny a nice guy? I bet he says, no, he wasn't. He was a ball buster, but he got the best out of you as a player, didn't he? So that's the difference between a good manager and a bad manager. And that's Steve Bruce is trying to be everybody's mate. And I'm sure, as you said at the start of the show, Dan, he's a lovely bloke, but that doesn't make him a good manager. I've got mates who are lovely blokes, but I wouldn't put them in charge of my company. He would fucking crumble at the seams if they did. So
this is a thing. As I say, they're all fitting to distinguish the sort of difference between sort of personal and public, and then professional.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't like the mental health card that's being pulled out here. I mean, we can't climb up inside Steve Bruce's head. We don't know what's going on there, so it's not fair for me to say. But
even then, like, well, you make a very good point there. But even if it was getting too much for him, and obviously, he could easily have walked away.
Exactly.
He has that option. Yeah. You're allowed to leave. It's not like you're bound by chains to
But there was 8 million reasons he didn't, Dan. 8 million reasons.
Smackaroonies why he wanted to stay.
Exactly, and that's the reason. And that's something that's kind of lost as well on people. But I don't like the narrative that the media is portraying, that Newcastle fans have ran this guy out of town. That he was such a lovely man and such a great, he's a family man and all this stuff. I know the guy said in the last True Faith podcast, that doesn't matter a jot. You can be a family man and you can be an arsehole, right? I'm not saying that he was
all these things they're saying about him, saying, he was a great player, he's a lovely family man, he's a nice bloke.
Yeah,
that may be the case, but what's that got to do? Like, what has that got to do with his style of management and his record at Newcastle? Absolutely not.
But exactly, he's won 7 games in 38 games. That's a calendar season for a Premier League season.
It's relegation form.
It's relegation form, Dan, as you rightly say, mate. And that's the reason he's lost his job, plain and simple. My only criticism of the regime was that I think they should have sacked him the week before. I'm not saying we would have beat Spurs, but I think we would have had a much more positive response, or a positive performance, if he hadn't been here. Because the minute it started to turn sour, you were at the game, it started to turn sour. All eyes went to the touchline, didn't they? That was probably the biggest mistake they made, I think, really made.
Yeah, well, I mean, on Sunday, I think we all of us tried. We didn't want to sing "We Want Bruce Young," and I know I didn't sing it even when it started, because I felt like I knew he was going to be sacked anyway, so I thought, well, there's no point saying it. Like, he's going to go. But I don't think anyone really wanted to sing that on Sunday, because we were all trying to be so positive about this new ownership. But it had gotten so bad that people felt compelled to do it. And I can understand, as much as I didn't do it, I can understand completely why people did it. But as I say, no one wanted to sing that. I don't think, and this is exactly what the True Faith lads and lasses said on their podcast. Like, people were trying to hold off from it because they were trying to, feed off this positivity from the new ownership. But eventually got to a stage
Yeah.
Eventually got to a stage where the football was so crap and so dire that the blame's on one man yet again. Because we can't blame Ashley now because he's gone.
That's exactly it. But the thing is, again, people always say that, Bruce has taken the flak for Ashley. We all knew Ashley was the problem. Everybody knew Ashley was.
It was always, in my opinion, that Ashley was the disease and Bruce was a symptom.
100%, 100%. But Bruce did not endear himself to us from day one. Everything was. He had a massive complex about Rafa Benitez, even before anyone spoke about it.
The mighty Rafa, as he'd call him,
Exactly, yeah. The way he conducted himself in press conferences, the way he referred to us all as keyboard warriors and histrionics and hysteria. When we were absolutely gutless in the cup, when Bournemouth reserves put us out, there was never any humility from the man. There was never any admission of guilt or fault. That listen, hey, I hold my hands up. I'm the manager. I picked the team. That wasn't good enough. We're going to go on the training pitch and work. That's all we wanted as a fan base.
All it was every week was, we'll dust ourselves down and we'll go again.
Yeah, it was Brucey bingo, wasn't it? You could
you could Brucey bingo. You could get severely drunk every week of playing Brucey bingo.
A shot every time he says, "Well, a shot."
Well, or dust ourselves down, or we'll go again, or we'll learn from it.
But it'll be very interesting, just kind of finishing up on this note. I'm sure this whole obituary to Steve Bruce in the media will quieten down, especially when our new manager's installed, because there'll be all eyes on him. Some of them would want him to fail. I'm sure Paul Merson will go on Soccer Saturday. He won't even be able to pronounce the guy's name probably, unless it's Eddie Howe. And then he'll say, I'm sure he's going to fail, etc., etc. But kind of looking at it, retrospectively, from our side of it, we're going to move on. Graham Jones is taking charge.
Gateshead Graham.
Gateshead Graham. But do you know what would be really interesting for me, Dan? I'll get your opinion on this in a second. Imagine Graham Jones tells the lads, shackles are off, show the new manager what you can do, right? And let's just say, I'm not saying we're going to, because Palace actually look a decent side, Let's just say we absolutely hammer Palace, right? And we play unbelievable front foot football. Everyone's right bang at it from the minute one, and we beat them 3 or 4-0, right? What are the FOSB going to say then about Steve Bruce?
They wouldn't know what to say, I think, is there? Oh, no, I say that, though. They'll probably try and spin it some way, won't they?
I'd imagine so.
They'll probably try and spin, but Graham Jones was undermining Steve Bruce when he was there and all that.
Yeah. All his fault. And just before we move on to who the next manager might be, Dan, what do you think for the weekend, mate? Do you fancy it with Graham Jones and dugout? What do you think?
It's a tough one, isn't it? I mean, Palace played very well against Arsenal on Monday night, and so I think it's still going to be a tough game. I'd take a draw at this point.
I fancy a draw. I fancy a once each draw, I think, and a much better performance, I would say, because I think these players will step up. I think now he's gone with a bit of freedom.
I'd take a draw.
Yeah. So now the bacon's fried, mate. It's all burnt, extra crispy. We're going to throw it in the bin, and let's look to the future just quickly to round up the show. The new manager links. So there's 3 names that don't go away. They're on Sky quite regular, and they're the names of Paulo Fonseca, Lucien Favre, and Eddie Howe. So we haven't got slides, unfortunately, because Mark only did 2, then he buggered off and left me alone. So I know he's terrible, isn't he? He's watching. I know he's watching. So just in the terms of the percentage wins, so starting off with that Portuguese fella, as Alan Brazil referred to him as, we'll call him Paulo Fonseca. Great manager.
Because that's his name.
That's his actual name. Front foot football, very, very charismatic manager. Very vocal, lovely comment when he said he ripped off Man United for Fred and those kind of stuff. Seems like a real character. His win ratio in his last job, which was Roma, was 51% win ratio, Dan. Compare that to 27. So just a little bit on Fonseca. He does seem to be the bookies' favourites, mate. Would you be happy with that?
Take anyone, Chris. It's got to a stage where the bar is so low. You take anyone, but... Well, yeah, no, you would. I mean, Fonseca looks all right. Favre, I'm not too sure exactly what the correct pronunciation is. Looks all right. I mean,
61% win ratio for Favre, mate.
I mean, personally, Favre would be the one that I'd personally go for, just because, he's had quite a good track record. Obviously, Fonseca's done well, but maybe not as big clubs as, say, Favre has been at.
Possibly, yeah.
Say Favre has been, Mönchengladbach's a big club. Zurich, for example, and Hertha Berlin as well.
Yeah.
And
Dortmund,
decent,
obviously Dortmund was
Dortmund,
was the last one for the 61. But it's interesting, when he took over Gladbach, they were kind of 17th, I think. And within a couple of seasons, he had them top 4, top 3. That
I don't think he's ever finished lower than 10th in a league he's been in.
That's incredible. That's a proper manager, not this 27% win ratio, scraping 30 in every job you've had. That is a proper manager. And finishing up, which is what the friends of Steve Bruce would love to see, an English manager getting the job. I like the guy, Eddie Howe at Bournemouth. Now, Eddie Howe's time at Bournemouth didn't end well. I think he went through that. I think he went through that stayed too long phase. But his Premier League win ratio is still 42%. So he's still way ahead of Steve Bruce in that regard, mate.
Yeah, no, you're right. The only thing I worry about Eddie Howe is that his defensive record wasn't brilliant at Bournemouth.
It was pretty poor.
And that has to be my priority at the minute, because we're leaking goals. From an attacking sense, to be fair, that's the one thing maybe that is sort of okay at Newcastle at the moment. We still look a threat going forward. We still look as if we can't score.
Oh, that's St James's Park on the phone, mate. Your job interview's lined up.
I'll go answer that quickly.
Dan's going to go and answer Amanda Stavely there. Just let her know whether he's interested in the job or not. I think you do a very good job. I don't know what his win ratio was previously, but I'm sure we're about to find out when he when he comes back in there. But yeah, obviously they're great managers. Looking at that, there be huge improvements on Steve. No doubt about that. He's back. What I was just saying, Dan. What's your win ratio, mate? I don't know what your win ratio is. I haven't got your stats.
What for
just for the job interview, mate? You would just say 36 or something. That'll do you, mate. You're ahead of Steve Bruce then, anyway. So you'll be all right.
40. There you go.
40% win ratio. I like your stat. But I was just saying there to listeners, mate, when you answer Amanda Stavely, any of these managers, no question, would be a huge upgrade, mate, wouldn't it? No doubt.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, it can't get any worse, can it? That's the thing.
Surely can't, mate.
Surely not. Obviously, as I say, the defense has to be my priority though at the moment, because we're leaking goals, and that's the reason we're losing games. And we need to. I mean, and the midfield, to be fair, because as I say, Sean Longstaff and John Joe Shelby, they look awful. Even Isaac Hayden looks a shadow of the player he once was. So yeah, attacking wise, obviously Callum Wilson and Alan Saint-Maximin do what they do. But they can only do what they do if you get the ball to them.
That's true. Very true, mate. That's and Wilson's obviously, his injury record isn't great. Even if he's back for 6 or 7 games, he does well. He could be a bad tackle or a sprint away from having a pulled hamstring or something like that. So we really can't rely too heavily on him. I think whichever manager comes in, personally for me, I think they're leaning more towards Fonseca and Favre.
I personally think it'll be one of those. I think Eddie Howe's unlikely.
I think so, yeah. I think they might have interviewed him. Weird enough, I think Alex had mentioned in the True Faith chat earlier on that he thinks that Eddie Howe was probably more like an Ashley appointment if Bruce had to get sacked. And under Ashley, we would have been buzzing with Eddie Howe. There's no doubt that would have been a massive step up. But now we've got these new owners with this ambition and and the ideas that they have. I think getting a Fonseca or Favre is a massive, kind of statement of intent by these new owners. And I think that these players, because they're students of the game, they watch European football quite a lot. They'll know who these two guys are, and I think they'll be excited we're working these two guys. And I'd be very interested to see what they could get out of this group of players to get us to January. And I think you're always going to get a new manager bounce, and I think that'll carry us through to a position where we're not in the bottom 3 by January, and then you can start spending money.
Even if we're sat, say 16th come January, that's okay.
Yeah,
because we're out at the bottom 3. Hopefully, have a few wins on the board, and even if it's just like hovering above, then get a bit of money in January. Then hopefully, finish. Even if we finish again 12th or 13th or 14th, that's fine for this season, as far as I'm concerned.
I think so, but with the right investment and the right manager, and if you can get the best out of these, because there is some decent players there. Mankio's a steady player.
I've maintained that this squad, like a good manager, could get a tune out of this squad.
I think so. I think a good manager could get this squad top 10, and then if you add a couple of really good players,
if Benitez can get that squad top 10, like that he had, if he can get that team top 10, with, as I say, Joselu up front. then a decent man. Right, I think Rafa could get our current squad top 8.
It's such a shame that this happened after Rafa was unavailable, mate. It is a real shame because he would have just slipped straight back in perfectly, wouldn't he? And it would have been like he'd never left.
I think if he hadn't gone to Everton and this has now happened, I think they would have gone for Rafa.
I think he would have been there now. He would have been there against Spurs, mate. He could have walked straight into that.
I think he would have came straight back.
Yeah, I think you're right. But yeah, that ship has sailed, mate. We're looking forward to whoever the new captain is going to be. And thank God, coming the weekend, we won't be watching Steve Bruce's Newcastle United, mate. But just before we shoot off, mate, as we always give you the chance to push whatever podcast you want to push this week, mate. Do you want to fire one through?
Oh, gosh. I'll go back to the NUFC Opinion Blog, which is my sort of little baby, my own channel, because there's exciting things to come on that soon.
Good man.
So do look out for it. There's a special announcement to come on that channel from me in the next couple of days as well.
Absolutely. Well, we'll stick a link to your channel underneath, mate. Mark will do his magic with the with the blurb in the YouTube description. But if you guys like the Slide Rule Pass, we've had some great views recently, especially the takeover video, which Dan joined us on as well. Just make sure you click like and subscribe. We're more than happy to have more subscribers on. We talk about all of football. Obviously, we're focused on Newcastle a lot recently because of the the events that have gone on.
Just some small, minor events that might have happened.
Exactly. But we've got a lot of exciting things coming too. We did a player profile on Harry Kane with a great guy from Spurs podcast, The Extra Inch, and that's on the YouTube channel now. So yeah, we like to have as much content as we can for all football fans. And would love to have you join on YouTube. If you're listening on the audio, we're on all podcasting platforms, Spotify, iTunes, Pocket Cast, the whole lot. So just come and join us, Slide Rule Pass, and we'll love to chat a bit of football banter with you as well. But for now, Dan, that's us all done, mate. We're going to go and get excited for the weekend. You ring Amanda Staveley back and just tell her your contract details.
I'll tell Mandy that. I'll tell that I'm getting back to her.
Mandy, God, he's on first name basis. Well, you're definitely getting the job, mate. Just don't forget us, mate. Don't forget us. We'll have exclusive interview off your first press conference, mate. So
I can confirm it was not Amanda Staveley.
God, you could have everybody wound up there in the comments below. But listen, mate, thank you very much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure as always talking Newcastle with you. And that's all done from the Slide Rule Pass. Stay tuned to the channel, and we'll catch you next time, guys. See you later.
Ciao.